All right now. Welcome in, welcome in, welcome in. And this is Motivational Monday. All right now. With I Bring It Every Day. Thank you so much for coming. And I just want to tell you why we're here. All right now. Thank you so much. I see some eyeballs. Thank you for coming in. Let's say hi and then we'll get moving right to it. So the Bud Files is here. Yay. And Suzanne, thank you so much for coming. All right, so this is why we're here today. And I just want to talk a little bit more because last week really got me off on a good start in terms of these first ladies. And I'm going to just follow up on just really one thought today that really resonated with me that Pat Nixon said. Oh, good morning. And there's Gulf Coast Granny. All right, so let's get to it. I'm going to read this quote. And, oh, yeah, let me do one more thing too. I just thought about it. Um, so anyway, just let me just backtrack just a minute. So every week we like to come here on the I Bring It Every Day channel and try to encourage each other, and we're trying to start the week off on a positive note. And what I found helpful in my life is just to talk, just to see what relatively successful people are up to and what their mindset. And that's my little water, and a little bit of ice. And there's Good Morning Bill. So, as part of this Motivation Monday, one of the things that I just kind of stumbled on was a book about the first ladies. Now, a while back, like when I was in elementary school, we used to talk about the presidents, usually the men, right? And all of a sudden I said, oh my gosh, we got to talk about some of these first ladies. I think, I won't say they were better than their husbands, but they were. Or they were really, really good. They had really strong minds. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people I don't think about. But anyway, I'm going to give you this quote from Pat Nixon because we were talking about her, and when she passed away, the biggest legacy that she left was that she raised a good family. Okay, so I'm going to do her quote today, and she says that politics is a funny business. You're up one day, down the next. And this was from Time Magazine, October 9th, 1972. So I'm going to write that one in. And we're going to, and this is why this resonated with me. So when I thought about she's saying it's just politics. It is not. It's life. Life is the thing where life is always up and down. You know what I mean? So the whole thing is, it's not just politics, it's life. And I was thinking, then you go back and you think about your life, and the ups and downs that you faced. And so to me, that just sums up life. It's not just politics. So anyway, let's put this in. So this is Pat Nixon. So she said, let's say Pat Nixon. This is Time Magazine. And this was 1972. I'm just going to put 1972. So she said, politics. That is spelled right. But that looks funny. That's a word you don't write every day. Is a funny business. And I just want you guys to meditate on this because this is really a metaphor for life. It's funny business. Yep. You're up one day. Okay. Down the next. Okay. And there it is. So this is, like I said, for me, this equals life. The game of life. You know what I mean? Yeah, this is basically life. Okay, let's put that up there. So there it is. So I don't know. Let me know what you think about that quote. I just thought it was very interesting. So, but also, I wanted to talk a little bit about Pat Nixon because I don't know if everybody knows a little bit about her. And so anyway, so the bottom line is, um, what do you do when you're up? Everything's great, right? But when you're down, what do you do to bring yourself back up again? And everything in life is stages. You know what I'm saying? But you have to remember that it's everything's kind of temporary, and I think that's really the message. So when you're down, it's temporary. When you're up, it's kind of temporary also. So just having a good, wrapping your mind around that is probably the best way to kind of live it without, bringing yourself down into I won't say a depression, but you know what I'm saying? Like, like you feel bad when you're down, you're happy when you're up. That's kind of the way life is. So yeah, there it is. But isn't that interesting? So I want to talk a little bit about Pat Nixon because I think her life is interesting. All right. So just going back. So Pat Nixon, interestingly enough, was first lady under Richard Nixon, that her husband, but she was also second lady because Nixon was vice president under Lyndon Johnson, and Lyndon Johnson was the post Kennedy president. After the assassination. So there's a whole lot of stuff. Like pretty heavy. I think both of their terms were a little bit heavy. But let me just give you just a little bit of a background on her. So she was born in Nevada. She grew up in California. She went to a junior college and then Fulton Junior College. And then, let's see, University of California, University of Southern California, USC. Yep. And she paid for her schooling. And this is where I think this is good for people who may be a little younger or just whatever. She paid for her own college education by working multiple jobs. And I'm reading this from Wikipedia. So she was a pharmacy manager, a typist, a radiographer, and a retail clerk. So in 1940, she married Richard Nixon, who was an attorney, and they had two daughters, Tricia and Julie. And the Nixon couple was called the Nixon team, and they campaigned together in his successful congressional campaigns of 1946 and 1948. And then he was elected vice president in 1952. Oh, no, sorry. This was Eisenhower. Actually, she was elected vice president under Dwight D. Eisenhower. Yes, that's right. Because because Kennedy beat Nixon. That was a big thing. Yeah, I remember that. Okay, there we go. So sorry, I got that a little out of order. Okay, or wrong president. But anyway, so Pat Nixon added a lot to the first lady role because the first lady role was kind of like the wife. And so what she did was she visited schools, orphanages, hospitals, and village markets, and she did many goodwill missions around the world. Now, I don't know if you remember, but Nixon was one of the first people to go to China. So that was a really big deal when they went to China, and I forget what year that was. Um, and she also visited the Soviet Union, which now is like Russia, Ukraine, and other. So very interesting. And she also did solo trips to Africa and South America. And she became an ambassador, basically. And she was also the first lady to enter a combat zone. Okay. Now, so the biggest brutal thing that happened, obviously under the Nixon campaign or under the Nixon presidency was that so he was elected in 1972. He was reelected actually, and he was reelected by a pretty huge margin. And they only completed 2 years of the term because he resigned in 1974 due to the Watergate scandal. Right. And so that was like a really big deal because he was the only president to resign. Yeah. And, and I don't know if you know the background of Watergate, but look it up. It's kind of interesting. um, so yeah. So there it is. Oh, so let's see. Charlotte saying Gulf Coast Granny. Johnson was president when I was born. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So let's see. So that was kind of brutal, and so the whole thing with resigning, oh my gosh, like that was like that's never happened. And I don't know how they picked it up. I mean, he kind of like not retreated, but he definitely stayed out of the limelight. And actually, maybe she did too. Like they kind of just went back home, built the library, Nixon library of all his information, and then just sort of just kept it going. But they they stayed pretty relatively quiet after he resigned. But anyway, she they ended up going back to California. They moved to New Jersey, and she suffered two strokes, and one in 1976, another in 1983, and was diagnosed with lung cancer in 1992. And she died at in 1993 at the age of 81. So, yeah, so that's really it. So that's kind of the interesting thing. But like I said, the biggest thing that a lot of people said about her was that she raised a great family, and she did a lot, behind the scenes. She really got out there, and she actually campaigned for him as well. Really really hard, and she liked shaking hands with people, and connecting with people, I think, was her thing. Yeah. So, uh-oh, Mr. Scott, hello. And Sonia's here. Oh, and thank you. Oh my goodness. Okay, Scott, thank you so much. All right, so here we go. All right, let's put this here. Thank you so much for the super chat. I suck so much and you are so awesome. Wait a minute. I am like, well, behind the scenes. Let me see. How crazy do I look? I'm not too crazy. Oh, hello. Thank you, Scott. So keep smiling, keep shining, knowing you can always count on me. For sure. That's what friends are for. In good times, in bad times, I'll be on your side forevermore. Oh, that's what friends are for. So thank you. Yes. And hey, Rudy, how's it going? Oh, you have gone to the Nixon Library. Cool. Well, you got to tell us, like, what did you learn anything new about the Nixons? Yes. So yeah, there it is. But thank you so much. Scott. That's pretty cool. And I think also, hey Rudy, hey, hold on a second. Hey Rudy, can you just couple of chats, but no numbers, please. Okay. Thanks, Rudy. All right now. All right, let me go back. So anyway, so thank you so much, Scott. All right. So like I said, so Patricia Nixon, was well, her name wasn't Patricia, but Pat Nixon. And this is what I wanted to get to a little bit also in her Wikipedia. So let's look at her name. Okay, this is crazy. She has a great name. Let's see here. Okay. So her name was Thelma Catherine Ryan. And that's her name, but they called her Pat. So pretty cool. Very nice name. And so, like I said, and I think she lost her parents at a very early age. And that's why she was all by herself, you know. And she was very resilient, you know what I mean? And I can't imagine being an orphan. A lot of that happens to a lot of people, and especially when they're young. You know what I mean? I don't think I was prepared for any of that. Like I can't even imagine. I paid for my college education, but I'll tell you, it was not enough. You know what I mean? Like what I did earn, but even but the fact that she had four jobs, I can honestly say maybe I had a job and a half. I didn't have four jobs, so that's actually pretty good. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so that's really important. You know what I mean? So, but like I said, the biggest thing with her was that she really stood behind her husband, but yet she found her own way. And I'm gonna get you. I'm gonna let me get one more thing that. So yeah, so according to this, she lost both of her parents by the age of 18, which is amazing. So but she did get her degree. She worked hard. Went to school, paid for it on her own, and got her own degree on her own. And so that's a good message for a lot of people, that when you're down, you know you can pick yourself up. And being an orphan, I don't know how much more down you can get, really, because I still call 18-year-olds children. You know what I'm saying? Yes. Yes, yes. Oh, historical note. Okay, yes. And we have a lot. So we have a lot of history in Philadelphia. I'm in the Philadelphia area, and actually Pennsylvania in general, because Pennsylvania was, I can't remember if it was the third state or the fourth state, but that was entered into the Union. So it goes way back. But there are a lot of historical things there, and the Nixon Library. I would love to go to any of the presidential libraries. But that sounds pretty cool. Yeah, yeah. But anyway, I will take that under note. And thanks for coming in, everybody. See, Liz is there. And so anyway, so like I said, everything that everybody said about her was that she was a great woman, and that she was sweet and kind and loving to her family. And to me, that's a good thing to leave. What's a legacy that you want to leave? I think that's it. So anyway, so there's that. So that's the one thing I wanted to say to her. And so like I said, but so what do you do when you're down? You know, you have to pick yourself up. You have to pick yourself up and you have to say, hey, I've got to you have to pivot. And that's really what the thing is, in life. If you like, especially for her, I mean, she had to find, you just think about it, she had to find out where she was going to live, how she was going to eat, how she's going to pay for these things. I mean, that's huge. So that was a pivot that was unplanned. But if you're doing something that doesn't go your way, then the biggest thing that you have to do is you have to pivot. So, you might have to find a different career choice. You might have to find a different way to finance, and I think, like, for me, everything, not that everything's money, but definitely, financing a lot of things kind of determines which way you go and how you go about it and how long it takes you, to finish things. So it's very, very interesting, So I think about this all the time, and I'm trying to think of, I mean, just lately, I haven't really, so the other thing that I was thinking too is that, every week what we try to do when we come here is we try to say, okay, what the heck do we want to do this week that maybe that's going to move you further ahead. So I'm working on my YouTube channel, and I'll just use that as an example. There's a few, like, because I do a little crafting. I've been doing a lot of crafting kind of behind the scenes, practicing things that I've never done before. And that's sort of what I've done to sort of help build some things. I mean, the other thing that I'm doing behind the scenes too is getting information about gardening. So I've gardened, a little bit when I was younger as a kid. And now that I actually have some space to actually garden, and I have the time, to keep an eye on everything, I've been reading up on, different plants and different things and how to manage the soils, things like that. So these are the things that you have to sort of do. There's a lot of learning in life, that you have to sort of go back and look for. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of the things that I like for last week. I did do some reading up on the gardening. I went to actually, there's a garden meeting coming up at the garden club, so I'm going to be doing that this week. And then what else? Yeah, so that's like the big thing I'm going to be doing this week is going to this garden club and checking out and seeing what they're doing. Yes. Okay. So there we go. And then Sonia said, let's go back to the chat here. Oh, so you've gone to both Ronald Reagan and Nixon. Yeah, they're both in California. And I like the personal artifacts such as the first lady's dresses. Yeah, that's really interesting because I'll tell you the times that she was first lady and second lady. I think that was the height of the fashion. I think the 50s and the 60s were really good for fashion, and everything was made with nice material. There was a lot of art, a lot of style that went behind it. And people really cared about fashion. If you compare to today, a lot of it's fast fashion where they're just kind of blowing it out, and they're blowing it out in a day or two, paying, no money to the people that actually sew. And it's kind of brutal. Like, actually, clothes were more expensive back then than they are now, which is very interesting. Yes. And let's see. Okay, Suzanne saying, take us to the Heinz Library Center when up in Pittsburgh. Yes, that's one of the places I want to go. And yeah, John Heinz did a well, when he was he a senator or a congressman? I cannot remember. But when he passed away in Philadelphia. But there's a lot of Heinz, like there's a lot of his work that's kind of on this side of the state. But they're from the Pittsburgh area. Yeah, Heinz, which is the ketchup people. Yeah. Yep. So that's pretty cool. So I will definitely check it out. Yeah, that's one of the things I would like to hit. And the other place I want to check out is the. I cannot remember the name of the museum. I guess it is the Heinz Center. Yeah, I guess it is. That's where the Mister Rogers, I think, is there. Yep. Also, yep, the Mister Rogers Museum. And there's also a museum at St. Vincent College. Yep. Oh, the President's House in Philly. Okay, I'm writing these down. I gotcha. All right now. So gotcha. Thank you, Suzanne. I really appreciate it. So I don't know. So what do you think of Pat? Like I said, Pat Nixon. I really think people people kind of people really liked her, and I'm going to go back again and talk a little bit of I'll just give you just a little bit of background where people really liked her. I just think it was good. Hold on a second. But this quote here I just thought was pretty much it kind of shows life. I mean, and how do you guys, and I guess that's the question, how have you guys, picked yourselves back up and moved ahead when you needed to? I mean, that's always the question. Yes. Okay. Here we go. Let me go back here. Okay. Now, here's another quote she said, Pat Nixon. She said, "You don't know what it's like to be a politician's wife." And she said she'd only voted once in her life, and that was for Roosevelt. Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah, she said some really interesting things here. Let me go back to, when I go back to, yeah, that's very interesting. She said that. And then here we go. Oh, now this is interesting. So this is Laura Bush, and she said the role of the first lady is whatever the first lady wants it to be. He was a senator. That's what I thought. Okay, cool. Yes, thank you, Suzanne. Yeah, I thought he was a senator, but I didn't want to misspeak. Yep. But yeah, that's really interesting. Here we go. Let's go back here. Yeah, I like this one. Come on. Pat Nixon. Hang on just a sec. I had this marked, but I lost it. Okay, here we go. Clinton. Ford. Ooh, these are interesting. We talked about, here we go, here we go, here we go. Hillary Clinton. Nope, that's not the one. Equal opportunity. Yeah, that was what Bush said. And let's see. Of course, I can't find this quote, but we'll keep going, and I'll jump back to it. But so like I said, the biggest thing here is you want to make sure that you have to pick yourself up. So like I said, these ups and downs, and that's what I'm why I like us to come together and sort of talk through some of this stuff, so that when you are down, that you don't just stay down, and because life goes on, and hopefully you get another day, and that's really what it is. You want another day. You know what I mean? And I mean, usually we get another day. And if we get another day, then that means that we have to get out there and move forward. And that's the deal. That's the deal. Yes, yes, yes. So let's see. Page 66. I think this might be it here. All right. So you're not okay. Let's see. So Suzanne's saying, I like a low stress life, so I never thought about being in the spotlight. Oh, interesting. Yeah. And that's the deal for sure. Yeah. And you're not attention seeking. Yeah, and that's interesting. I've always been on the edge, you know what I mean? So, oh, here we go. So Gulf Coast Granny, thank you so much for sharing. So you're saying I spent the first half of my life picking myself up. I might be out of practice, but I think it's a skill that once learned can be found pretty quickly if needed. That is for sure. That is absolutely for sure. And see, and that's a good thing, because I think they say that you really don't learn through success. You learn through failure. And I was like, "Oh man, I guess that's correct." You know what I mean? Like I never really thought about it, until when I was much older. And but for me, like I was always a learner, so I was always had a book in front of my face. You know what I mean? That was always my thing. And so I just think it's interesting. But but yeah, I just say, you know what I mean? I just go, "Oh, so like I said, it's been pretty common on my in my life at this point too. So I really haven't had to do a whole lot of pivoting. But that's one of the things I don't think my parents ever really talked about. Like they kind of said, "Hey, um, you know, they just kind of said, work hard, and that is part of it, but also like what do you do when things don't work out? See, those are the things that I think a lot of parents don't talk about. But so here's another quote from Pat Nixon. So she said, she's talking about growing up on a farm. She said, "It was very primitive. It was a hard life. That's true. I don't know what it's like not to work hard." Yeah. And that's in every farmer that I've ever met felt that way. They always said, this is crazy. That like it's so hard. So hard. So hard. Yeah, here we go. So let's see. Oh, there's Cicely's here. Good morning. Yes. And good to see you. And Gulf Coast Granny saying those lessons that hurt real bad are the ones where you learn the fastest. That is for sure. That is for sure. Yep. And it's amazing. I don't know how. It's hard. Like you know what I mean. You have to give yourself. And I always say with all of this, you have to give yourself a little time. You kind of have to grieve. And I know that's one thing that a lot of people say. You shouldn't. Well, they don't say you shouldn't grieve. They kind of say like get over it. But I don't agree with that per se. I always say you have to work your way through the pain so that you can go forward. You know what I'm saying? And that's the thing that I don't know. See, I had like my sisters were tough too. They were like, "Ah, get over it," and I'm like, "Wait a minute." Like I have to feel the feels and get through it. But that's always the way I've been. You know what I mean? But I just thought that was insane. Just get over it. No, 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 no. You got to work your way through it. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, I see some people coming in. So good morning, Miss Cecily. We're doing well. And Renee. Oh, Renee's here. Hey, amen. Yes. And then Suzanne is saying, I believe the definition of hard has evolved in the last 50 years. Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting now that you say that. So, hard work. Yeah. What does that mean to you? Okay. So, let's say, what does that mean to me? See, working harder, I think you have to work. So, first of all, I think you have to work. But working harder doesn't mean that you're doing better. And so there's a line. Like I always say, there's always a line with balance. You have to sort of find your way, through all these things. Because um working harder doesn't necessarily mean you'll accomplish more. And a lot of people don't believe that. But that's something that I feel like, and I don't want to say work harder, work smarter. Don't work harder, work smarter. But I think there's a little bit of that too. You shouldn't have to work so hard to move forward, but you have to work. And that's really what it is. Yeah. And that's kind of, my feelings on that one. But yeah, but over the last few years, I think I don't know what people think about when they're work. Like in other words, who works the hardest and then, passes away and they've done nothing else. Like I kind of go, well, was that worth it? I don't know. I mean, in my mind, that wasn't worth it. Yeah. So I don't know. It's kind of crazy. You know what I mean? Yeah. So there it is. But there's that. But you got to think about it. It's very interesting. Let me see. What else do we have here? But but I just wanted to leave you this thought from Pat Nixon. She was working it. You know. Let's see here. Trying to think if there's any other thing that I wanted to say. But this one, like I said, every week when I go back and I look through some of this stuff, I go, "What the heck? what can we think about? What will push us through the week? Yeah, and so that's where I am there. But let's go here. I want to look at one more thing, and then we'll go. We'll keep it going. Now here's a let's see. So a lot of like I looked up a lot of quotes, and they were talking more about like they say women, because we're sort of in a secondary position in life. And I don't know if anybody agrees with that, but when I was growing up, for sure, women took a sort of a second place, compared to a lot of the men. And so a lot of times they would sort of shrink down a little bit and um let the man shine. But like I said, when I was reading through this book, I said, boy, these women actually did some really good stuff. You know what I mean? I feel like, you know, maybe they shrunk themselves down a little bit, just because you don't want to overtake the president. But I'll tell you, that a lot of these women, you know, had great minds, and I stand by it. I stand by it. Yep. So let's see. Oh, here we go. Oh, this is good. Um, so Renee's saying the basic needs hierarchy will dictate how hard you work. Oh, that is for sure. That is a really good point. And it sort of speaks to Pat Nixon being 18 years old and an orphan, and trying to figure out her life at that point. Yeah, so she had to work it. You know what I mean? But also she grew up on a farm, which means she knew how to work. Yeah, very interesting. And also, yep, let's see, Suzanne saying, I believe goals drive one to progress. Yeah, that's for sure. And I think a lot of people, I think people forget that you have to set a goal. Like, it really does help you stay focused. So, and I don't know if you all agree with this, but I think you have to write it down, you know, and it just sort of cements it in your brain. And you sort of have to go back and look at it. And a lot of people put it on their refrigerator. They'll put it on like a sort of like a dry erase board, sort of like this, just so that it keeps it in your forefront, of your mind. Because I feel like if you don't do that, you'll forget. You know what I mean? You will forget. Yep. So that's where we are. And so, here's a quote from Jackie Kennedy. She's talking to. It was a biographer, and his name was Michael, edited by Michael Betchlosh, 2011. And it's called Jacqueline Kennedy Historic Conversations on Life with John F. Kennedy. And one of the things that she said was, um, everyone should be trying to help Jack in whatever way they could. And that was the way I could do it the best, by making it always a climate of affection and comfort and détente when he came home. So she, support, definitely supporting men. Yeah. Supporting her husband. Yep. Yes. So that's really, really important, But so I think that was one role, but then, she became an ambassador, which was her second role, which I think kind of helps people at least understand that, you have to sort of give. It's like a vision of service, instead of just taking and taking, being of service, helping others and things like that. Okay, and we have, let's see, Misty came in. Good morning, Misty. And here we go. Yes, I like this, Suzanne. No goals equals no progress. That is correct. Yep. Oh, yeah. Now this is interesting. So Renee, and I'm gonna just speak about Renee, and you can correct me on this. So she said her success in life was driven by fear, and ironically, so was mine. Although yours was more of a fear. It's all relative. You know what I'm saying? But that's very interesting. So Renee had a very interesting life, and it was, she had a little bit of trauma, going on. And I'm not going to spill all your beans, but the fact that she got away from some toxic people, and built her life, And maybe she didn't have the best family life, as she was growing up. But I can say, as a witness, she is attentive to her children and her grandchildren. And these people will never say, "I don't know where my mom was or my grandma was or mama." They're never going to say where I have no I know nothing about her. She spends as much time as she can with those children and grandchildren. And I think that's like a testimony, to her building her life, her family life, in a way that maybe she didn't have it, but she's giving her people a great family life. So whoop 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 to Miss Renee there. Yeah. And okay, and thank you, Miss Yarning with a Smile. Wanted to pop in, leave the DNA. Oh, you're welcome. Yes, and thanks for coming in. But yeah, I mean that's like the biggest thing. I mean, I know fear, and I can say honestly, Renee, I kind of lived my life in fear, and success was kind of based on fear. So, not that I was destitute or anything like that, but definitely we were not in the high social economic class, and for me, success was to try to up myself just a little bit higher than where I started. You know what I mean? In terms of earnings, so that I could actually do some things to sort of grow. Like in terms of, like finding a better place to live, getting reasonable education and things like that. So, but that, unfortunately, I think that's the way I lived my life a little bit too, was fear of being stuck, like around, and I was around a lot of toxic people growing up, not in my family, but in the area where I lived, there were a lot of toxic people. So I was always like, I gotta get out of here. I'm gonna find whatever I have to do. I'm gonna get the heck out of here and do better. Yeah. So there it is. Yeah. So that's for sure. Yes. And yeah, and Charlotte's concurring. Yeah. Gulf Coast Granny. Yeah, she sure has created the family she wanted. She's a remarkable lady. So yeah, yeah. So big up to Miss Renee Unraveled for sure. Yeah, that's it. That is it for sure. Yes. And she's saying thank you, yours. Oh yes, you're welcome. No, I mean it's really true. And like I said, when I was and I'll tell this story once again to anybody. I don't know if anybody was around, but when I first started this Motivation Monday, I met up with some people that were in my kindergarten class. Now I lived in a really small neighborhood. We had these really, it was a small city, but the neighborhoods were delineated really really tight. And the thing that was interesting was I knew all of my, not all, but let's say maybe I had 20 kids in my kindergarten class. I think I knew about 12 of them before I even started school. So very interesting that I already knew them. And these were kids I had already played with. You know what I mean? We lived a block away from each other, most of us. And we were in and out of each other's homes. And nobody lives this way anymore. But I knew both their parents. I knew everything. Like that's how involved we were in each other's lives. And but anyway, but the long story short was, so my mom, anyway, so we had poor people around us, right? And when I say poor, I think the reason that I didn't suffer like a lot of people not having a lot of money was because of the area where we lived was very inexpensive. So we were able to sort of make it. Like I've always been able to make it. I might not have had like a ton of cash in the bank, but always been able to make it and have just a little bit. And so anyway, but we had people in our neighborhood that were I don't know how to say this. There's not really a nice way to say this, but they didn't bathe. I know it's crazy, right? And they didn't bathe and they had lice. I mean it's crazy. So and we had some family, and it wasn't necessarily one racial group or whatever. I mean, we had just these four or five families that were just like living on the edge, and maybe they had so many children, maybe they had too many children, and I don't know why they couldn't go to school clean, but there was always some issue, like some kind of thing like that. So we had some of those people, but then we had some people that had a little bit of cash because they were like steel workers, and steel workers made like a ton of cash even back in the day. I mean, those people were almost six figures back in the day. I mean, it's weird. So we had just kind of, Whoops, sorry. Hit the wrong button. Oh boy. Sorry. I'm trying to change my screen here. All right, here we go. Sorry. Trying to change my screen. Anyway, so um so getting back to the cat. So I don't know. So we had this really broad range of people, and so we just had a lot going on, you know what I'm saying? And but the point was we knew each other going into school. Oh my gosh. I am so sorry. Keep hitting the wrong screen. Trying to scroll down. Hold on, let me do this again here. I'm gonna scroll down. I'm having trouble scrolling. Okay. So anyway, but the thing about it was, one of the kids was a little bit on the poorer side, right? And not that they were poor, but they were struggling. And so the bottom line was, when I met up with some of these people, you know, the thing that I realized, and getting back to the family, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of going through the wilderness here. What I realized is that these people had awesome families. You know what I mean? So, and they actually uplifted themselves socioeconomically. There we go. That's where I'm trying to head. So, and then I realized to myself, I said, "Hey, I gotta really kind of kick my family stuff into overdrive, and if I can, And so that's something that my husband and I made a conscious decision to do. So we meet up with our kids all the time. So anyway, that's kind of the long story. I know. Sorry about the buttons there. But anyway, so Suzanne is saying, I feel I've grown up emotionally privileged. Yeah. I mean, when you have great families, it is huge. Let me tell you something. And I never realized like how huge that is. You know what I mean? But I mean, I knew it, intellectually, but when you grow up and you sort of get wiser, and then you see like really what life's all about. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that's really good. Yeah, and yeah, that's right. You grew up in the New York City area. That's right. Yep. I think your environment is very important for development. Yeah, that's for sure. And when I sit there and I wonder about people, who are really, really poor, like can they break that cycle? I don't know. You know what I mean? I was fortunate, I like I said, it was, for me it was a village. I had I had people helping me out. I worked a little bit, and my parents helped me out. I had people like in school that sort of helped me out. So it was a lot, and then I had, my guidance counselor in high school, gave me a little cash to kind of get me started, things like that. So it was really, really cool. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that's really important. You know what I'm saying? So, but that's the whole thing that I realized, like I said, getting back to, starting this Motivation Monday, I was like, man, I really got to kick my family life into overdrive. Well, I would like to. The other thing was, trying to be sort of a better person. And what I mean by that is, to try to cause no harm. And, so that's kind of the way I've been living my life, since about 2023, I think. Yep. So anyway, hopefully that makes sense. Yes, and I do think the same thing, Renee. You're always interested in nature versus nurture. Yeah. What happens? And and I definitely think that not that it's always about money, but I think finances really determine a lot of things. I mean, it determines where you live, you know, how well you're educated. I know, like, I don't know about California, but I know Pennsylvania, there's a lot of, like the socioeconomics isn't as good. And it's like tax money kind of translates it. Well, the real estate tax translates into the school tax, which translate into, how much, like new equipment, new schools, those kind of things. And I think all that stuff really helps you out. And it's interesting. Yeah, and I wonder about that too. If your parents always said, and I have to say, like my grandparents, because I spent a lot of time with them too, would always say, you got to get an education because at least it'll give you just a little bit of a bump, you know, and that's easy to get, and especially not easy, but it's available. And that's, I always say that in the United States, I don't know how many colleges are available, but there are a ton. There are a ton. I mean, you have in community colleges, like there's ways to get education, in this country. if nothing else, because we definitely, I think one of the United States exports is education, imports or exports. Actually, more of an export. Where we have a lot of people that come in, to the country just to get the education because there's so many places you can go. Yes, so there's that. All right. So that's kind of how this whole thing evolved. You know, and I think like being on YouTube also really opened my eyes to a little bit more of the world because I know I think I probably retreated from about 2000 till about 2021. And it's interesting that it took me because I was raising my kids at that point. And so, I wasn't around, as much as I would like to be. Yeah. But anyway, but there's that. Yes. And let's see, we got Frugal Mamas here. Yes. Yes. Right. And this, here we go. Let's go back to, so that's what I'm saying. So money isn't everything, but it does give you choice. It gives you options. Yeah. And I agree with that. It buys choices. Yeah. And that's what I'm talking about. So it's not that I'm focused on money, 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 but I understand, the fact that it can get you into other places that you might not be able to get otherwise. Yeah. Let's see. Yes. And there's Frugal Mama, hello. And Suzanne said, yes. I feel bad for those with struggles, so I do a lot of charity work. Yeah, that is good. That is awesome. Yeah, charity work is good. And when you can, you know what I mean? And I think there's always a need. And I think people need mentorship, and I think especially the younger kids could really use a little bit of, mentorship that way. Yeah. So let's see. Yes. And education opens doors that are otherwise closed. That is for sure. Yep. And so that's how I've been able to at least, attain a reasonable life. For me, it was education and work. Yep. And let's see, did I miss anything? Hopefully not. And make sure I don't cause mayhem here. Yeah, this scrolling is not easy on this thing. Oh, there we go. Yes. Oh, here we go. Yeah, but I like this, the nature versus nurture. I always wonder about that. Yeah. You know, but I've seen no, see, I have to wonder about that. Yeah. So I had a friend who was adopted, and I don't know what her parents, the biologicals, I don't know what they did, but she had this brain that was like amazing. I wonder if they had that brain. But hmm. But she was one of those people, yeah, I went to high school with. Yeah. I always wonder about that. Yes. Yeah, the nature versus nurture. But I think there is something to it. I think the nurture I think it's a little like, genetics definitely rubs off on you. But you can also overcome some of the genetics by, the work, but by how you're taught. Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Did I miss anything here? Oh, same here. Sonia's saying, "Yep, education." That's what I think she's agreeing with that. Yep, that helps. Yep, everybody's saying hi. So there it is. But that's kind of like what I was thinking about today. Was Pat Nixon, because she really got me thinking. Like I said last week, she said a lot of interesting stuff about you know supporting her husband. She always liked to be, and they always said that she was like the last one who would always shake hands, whenever they were, whenever. So she liked connecting with people. And let me come back to here. Let me go back one more thing here. Yes. Oh, and the other thing is, she promoted volunteerism. I want to make sure I'm saying that. Yep. And she also acquired some art too, for the White House, which is very, very interesting. Yep. And let me see one more thing here. And oh, Sweet Pea Sid's here. Very good. Thanks for coming in. So this is the whole thing. So like I said, I just want everybody to remember, and I'm just going to read this quote again. Politics is a funny business. You're up one day, you're down the next. And like I said, it's not just politics. It's life. You're up one day and down the next. So you got to figure out, like your next step. And so the whole idea of this Motivation Monday is to, continually make a plan and, work the steps that you are to get to that plan. Yes. Right. Yes. Okay. Oh, okay. And then, oh, nice. And yes. Okay. So Renee lives near the Nixon Library. It's a great place. And oh, Sonia. Yes, Sonia. Let me go back here. She said, I grew up getting an education. I grew up with getting an education was the priority in my family. Yeah. And same here. Yeah, it was very important. And say hi to Sweet Pea Sid. And then here we go. Sonia saying, yeah, Pat was a role model for her time. I can't believe she paid for her college. I know. I couldn't do it. I needed a lot of help. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And that's insane. Because even it was expensive back then. Like college has never been cheap. You know what I'm saying? Never, never, never. It's always been so pricey. Yeah, let me see. One more thing here. Just wanted to say. Now, of course, I can't find this quote. Blah, 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 blah. Let's see here. But I like I said, I really found that this was very interesting. And, like I said, the Clintons, definitely gave her high praises, during her memorial. And also Laura Bush, she said, I met her kids. I love her kids. And it's true. Like your children are definitely a reflection of how they were raised, and when people say, hey, your kids are awesome, that means you've done something right. I mean, not necessarily, but I think it does, when people say, your kids are awesome, you know? So there's that. So it's very important, to, let's see here. I don't like this one. But yes. Let's see. Oh, here we go. I like this. Oh, Renee's saying, two of my kids had 100K educations. They paid off every bit of their student loans in record time. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's amazing. Because, whew, I know I had a pretty big bill when I was done. And I don't know how people do it. You know what I mean? It's something. It really is something. But I love it. Yeah, that's see, that says a lot about you for sure. Yeah. 'Cause nowadays it's high. Let's see. Oh, Diamond Ring Girl's here. Good morning. Listening in the background, knitting a hat. Good for you. Good to see you. And then Renee's saying, no way could we pay for full ride education. There's no way. Yeah, it's see, and that's the thing. I tell you, I don't know how we can fix that, because this is the thing. I think that right now a lot of people really aren't taking advantage of education because of the price of it right now. And it's kind of brutal. You know what I mean? I didn't realize, the most they say what the average school is about 200K at this point. Now it's around 200K with everything. And nobody can afford that unless you're ultra rich. Like there's no way. I don't know, how they expect people to be able to do it. It's really bad. It is really, really bad. So I don't know. You know what I'm saying? It really is. Let's see here. Yes. Oh, this is interesting here. Speaking of education, um, Laura Bush said, the power of a book lies in its power to turn a solitary act into a shared vision. As long as we have books, we are not alone. I like it. Yes. And then, oh, here's something. Yeah, I think I read this one last week. This is Michelle Obama. And she said, the ability to read, write, and analyze, the confidence to stand up and demand justice and equality, the qualifications and connections to get your foot in the door and to take your seat at the table. All of that starts with education. And trust me, girls around the world, they understand this. They feel it in their bones. and they will do whatever it takes to get that education. That's kind of cool. Yeah. So, and she, like I said, Michelle Obama was definitely one that had to, she came from the South Side of Chicago. That's as poor as you can get, really. And well, not the poor as you can get, but South Side of Chicago is depressed. And became first lady. Went to law school. Went to Ivy League, Princeton undergrad. I think was it Harvard Law School? Harvard Law School. You know, first lady of the United States. Not too shabby. Yeah. So you know what I mean. So that's like an example of somebody who's gone through it. Yeah. So there it is. So like I said, um, remember life is up. Series of ups and downs, and make you have to make your changes to keep going. But the main thing is you just have to keep going. And like I said, I was kind of digging the way that people were thinking about Pat Nixon. She was a hard worker. So rest in peace. Let me see. I want to make sure I got her name right. Okay, hang on. We got this right here. We'll say big ups to Pat Nixon, and her name is. Hold on. Whoops. Her name is Thelma Catherine Ryan Nixon, and she lived from 1912 to 1993. And like I said, an orphan at age 18, worked her way through college, paid for it, had 3 or 4 jobs, and did it. And really campaigned hard for her husband, and had a great family, two children, Trisha and what's her other name? Trisha. But anyway, here we go. This is what I wanted to say. Okay, here we go. And I don't mean to extend this, but I just want to talk a little bit about this is what Richard Nixon said about her. Here we go. He said, this was 1975, so this was after he had left office. He said, I remember through all of our campaigns, whether it was a receiving line or whether it was going to a fence at an airport, she was the one that always insisted on shaking that last hand. Not simply because she was thinking of that vote, but because she simply could not turn down that last child or that last person. That was Richard Nixon talking about her. And then here we go. Here's Rosalind Carter. Uh, this was quoted from Time Magazine 2016. And Rosalind Carter said, in the years after leaving the White House, I've come to know Pat's daughters, Trisha and Julie. That's it, Julie. And realize how much they reflect her fine character and what a wonderful mother she was. I especially admire Pat's poise in the face of tremendous challenges. She was always gracious and courteous in every situation, and people everywhere, including me, felt a warm connection with her. Yeah. And then this is the last one let's see. Here we go. I think. Oh no, that was it. Those were the two. Yeah, those were the two that I wanted to say. And that just kind of gives you just a little bit of a vision of her life. And like I said, just kind of not comparing myself, but but just trying to do the best by my children and best by my husband, and to give at least a loving family life that they will forever know that they've been loved. Yep. Okay. Okay. So let's see. So Renee is saying, oh, okay, JD Vance. See, I don't know JD. I don't know much about him, so I have to. Yeah, I have to check him out. But it's weird. Like I've been sort of on this it kind of talking more about women. I'm not saying that men are I'm not bashing men, but I'm just saying women are sort of the underdogs kind of in the world. And so I'm kind of like, let's push up some women for a couple of weeks anyway. But here's the thing. So the quote that I have on the thumbnail, this is from Unknown, and it says the strongest actions for a woman is to love herself, be herself, and shine amongst those who never believed she could. And that's kind of some food for thought. But, like I said, as a kid, I studied the presidents, and I know quite a bit about the presidents, but I said, man, these first ladies have it going on. And that's kind of, kind of where I was. And I'm going to revisit this just a little bit more, but I just wanted to get a little bit more into Pat Nixon this week because I was just kind of thinking about her and kind of reflecting on my life and, what can I do better? Yeah. So there it is. All right. And like I said, I don't mind talking about politics. I think, what's interesting? It's just interesting to find out, I guess, the layers, like how all this stuff kind of came to be. You know what I mean? Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Frugal Mama. Yes. And I just want to say, just in general, thank you so much to everybody who supports the I Bring It Every Day channel in whatever way you can. Like I said, without the subscribers and the people that swing by and hang out, and I appreciate you all doing that. I'm nothing without you guys, and I will always say that. But and and like I said, and maybe maybe next week we can sort of, because like I said, all this is kind of based on your legacy. Like what the heck do you what do you want people to remember when you're gone? You know, do you want them to remember? Oh, she wore nice clothes. I mean, yeah, that's okay. But did you leave any positive impact on the world? And I think that's kind of what I got to thinking about these women. And like I said, when you think about it, the first ladies were not elected per se, and and they really had no choice. Well, yeah, well, no, they really don't have a choice. In the matter, and so you have to understand that there's some stuff that comes with this, and yeah, so there's that. Oh yes, there we go, and that's what I'm talking about. Yep, diamond ring girl. Women are still considered inferior. They will try to take advantage at the auto places thinking we know nothing. Oh boy, yeah. That is something. I've been through that a few times for sure. Yep. And so that's the whole thing. I just wish that people just accepted people as they are and we're kind and respectful, of people. And that's yeah, that is a huge thing. There's always this I'm better than you, and there's so much, we can go down the road with that one. It's gender, it's race, it's age, there's just a lot going on, and my whole thing is like, you just have to accept people as they are. You know what I mean? Or you can't prejudge. I guess that's what I'm saying. See it like I said the other day in our live stream when Renee and Sonia were here with me. We were talking about like meeting people in life and meeting people on YouTube. And the thing that I said, and I maintain this all the time, and maybe this gets me in a little bit of trouble, is I always try to accept people as they present themselves. So I don't necessarily go, oh, I don't like this person because of X, Y, and Z. I'm usually like, let me just see what they're up to. And so I try to make a judgment, and I won't say a judgment, but I try to sort of go friend or foe. And I just do it based on their behavior. And that's kind of, the way I've always tried to live my life. But of course in reverse, like, I've always been judged on so many things, that really have nothing to do with my character. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's kind of crazy. Oh, okay, Diamond Ring Girl. So this is interesting. Okay. Yes. Let's see what she says. Oh, she's talking about, okay. One woman who had a huge impact is Hillary Clinton, being First Lady, Secretary of State. She also has a long list on her resume. Yes, she does, actually. And I'll read this to you real quick. Yeah, unfortunately, like I said, I think people disliked her, and I think they just kind of threw her in the trash, um, because she is quite accomplished, So she was born in Chicago, and she met Bill Clinton while they were law students at Yale Law School, which is not too shabby. And she's always devoted her life to public service. And when she was a young lawyer, she worked to protect women and children. And then she was the first lady of Arkansas, first lady of the United States, a U.S. senator from New York, secretary of state under President Obama, and a two-time presidential candidate. So, and then most of these women also were advisors to their husbands, and she worked with her husband on. Hold on, I'm sorry, I'm losing my thing here. Um, okay, yes, she used her platform to continue advocating for the rights of women and children at home and abroad. There we go. And they had a child, daughter Chelsea, and she actually stood by her husband through the impeachment proceedings, due to the alleged affair with Monica Lewinsky. And then she wrote a book, upon losing the 2016 presidential election. And I don't know what she's up to these days. I think they're slowing down a little bit. I think they're, but she is quite accomplished. And I always wonder like what she would have done had she been president. I do. I always wonder. Yeah, I do. And I definitely think, Lady Bird Johnson, we talked about her last week. Um and the one thing that I know, and it's not really written here, but I saw in a documentary that she would critique her husband in his speeches. And I thought that was hilarious. But but she gave him very constructive, criticism on his speeches, and talked about things that he could add or take away, which to me is, constructive criticism is great. And I just thought that was very interesting, you know. And I'm trying to think anybody else. And like Laura Bush did the, she had a literacy campaign, you know, and Rosalind Carter also literacy and mental health. So there's a lot. So like I said, these women, and we could talk more about them later. But I like I said, I really think that people didn't really see, what the women were doing behind the scenes. And and a lot of them really did, work as unofficial advisors, to their husbands. Yep. Okay, see, Diamond Ring Girl says, I think she'd be a great president, but I wouldn't want Bill in the White House again. Oh, yes. Yeah, see, and it's interesting. Well, I will tell you. So I'll tell you a little Clinton story. It's not my story, but a friend of mine met him. So this is what's really interesting about Clinton, and this is coming from a 55-year-old male. Okay, so here it is. So one of my friends met Clinton at some kind of a, you know, I don't know if it was a political function or maybe it was it was like a school function or something. And the one thing that he said about Clinton that I thought was hilarious, he sort of started giggling like a schoolgirl, and he said, "Oh my gosh, he's so charming." And I went, "Ooh!" Like I kind of, I kind of went, "This is like a 55-year-old male, okay, who's like a 55-year-old heterosexual male was giggling like a schoolgirl over Bill Clinton," and I was like, "Wow, that's crazy." But that does kind of, to me, it kind of speaks to how charming he must be. And unfortunately, that kind of leads to other stuff. But anyway, there's that. Yes. But anyway, okay. So you motivate. So Suzanne said she's motivated to do some laundry. Yeah. So anyway, thanks for some thought provoking content, Kelly. Yes. Thank you so much. Yeah. So anyway, but like I said, all these things, I've been spending all this time sort of thinking about life. And I guess that's what it is. It's like life, like what's going on with life, and how can we make our life better? Yeah. So there it is. So yeah, so like I said, these women had it going on, and I keep saying that. I will always say that, and I'm fascinated, by some of the stories that I'm learning now. Because like I said, I learned more about the men, but less about the women. So let's all go out and have a great week. Once again, thank you so much for checking out the channel, and thank you to any of the lurkers and the replay people. We like the replay team; it's always awesome. But let's try to be better. Let's try to be better. Always, let's try to be great. And it's not easy. It's not easy. Requires a lot of work, but like I said, just pick one area and then baby steps. You don't have to change your life in a day. It's a lot. But just be better today than you were yesterday. All right now. And also go out and make something pretty if you can. And enjoy that nature. Yes. Because it's nice out. Well, not really. It's kind of sticky. But it's summertime in the US, and the weather is reasonable in the eastern side of the state. So there it is. Of the states. Yep. So there we go. So all right. Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to say thank you to Drizzle Stank wherever you are. And peace and love, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Yes, thank you so much. All right.